We're delighted that once again Rift have sponsored this episode. So all you need to do is head over to ript.app for all the information. That's rypt.app. So Ript is a platform that connects coaches with their clients and athletes. It helps you create individualized workout plans and deliver them to an app where your clients and athletes then can view their workout and have the support of exercise techniques on a day-to-day basis. They can then record their workout, their training load, and well-being data so that coaches then can monitor their progress and hopefully optimize performance. It's a great tool for S&C coaches, sports scientists involved with teams or working with individual clients or players, and also gyms and online coaches. We'll be using it as part of our DSS online training, which we've already launched, and we're delighted to have Cormac and the lads at Rift involved with us. We also have a special offer to share with all our listeners, which is fantastic news. All you have to do is go over to the DSS website, dailysportscience.com, and in the blog section and in the product section, you'll see a little article there with a link to a sign up to the Ript website, and you get 2 months free access for the platform. So make sure, go check it out.
Okay, welcome to the next episode of the Locker Room podcast. Those that are tuning in and wanted to hear the Irish and native Wexford voice, don't worry, Kieran Deedy's still here with me. We just slightly changed roles today, and I'll come back to you in a minute, Kiers. But first of all, a massive, huge, warm welcome to our guest today. The host of probably the biggest podcast in the performance and S&C and sports science industry, and also owner and founder of his business, Strength of Science. It's a massive pleasure to have you on today, Rob. So welcome, Rob Pacey.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to come on, especially in the early days. It's great.
Yeah, no, I mean, we haven't made it yet to your podcast. We thought if we got you on our one, we can at least have a chat with you. So nice, a pleasure to have you on.
Absolutely. No, thank you for having me on. Thank you very much.
No worries. I'm also here with co-host Kieran Deely, CEO of Deely Sports Science and sports scientist, S&C coach at QPR Academy. So Kieran, we've had some crackers in the last 3 or 4 weeks. It's been a whirlwind, and today is another great one.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's great to have Rob on. Like, we've had Bernard Jackman and Chris Ramsey and Rich Clark last week. So I'm personally really interested in the podcast and the business side of stuff and setting up business for S&C coaches. So I suppose, Ross, we said that we'd let you host it because I'd probably end up chatting for like 2 hours about all that.
We'll see how long this goes. But before we crack on, we must remind ourselves that Joe Coulter hasn't made the cut again today, kids.
Yes, substitute once again.
So Rob, we've got another co-host, Rob Joe, who comes in and out of podcasts, and he's the people's person back in Ireland, but he hasn't made it today, unfortunately. So just
okay.
So, you know. So Rob, we'll delve straight in on certain things. Just before we get into your career, and me and Kieran listened to your previous podcast with Steve Ingham there, and it's fascinating stuff, and we'll delve into that. But first of all, how does it feel to be like joined by the majority of the industry on this kind of virtual space on obviously these strange times?
The podcast has always been a weird one for me. And I think it probably is for you guys as well. You have a chat, you speak to someone, and you just press send and it just disappears. And you're like, is anyone where's this gone? Is anyone going to listen to it? It's always a strange, situation. Even now, 200 and odd episodes in, it's a strange scenario. But yeah, it's worked all right for me because I've got a half decent setup to do this kind of thing, go virtual, and but I'm trying to actually get a better webcam, but you can't get a webcam for love nor money because everyone's jumped on this virtual world. So hopefully the people that stick around post-COVID will be able to get their hands on a decent second-hand webcam because, I'm struggling. But no, it's an interesting one for everyone. But yeah, I'm very much used to it.
Well, people are trying to catch up to you now for sure, but it's I'm sure it's very interesting for you to see lots of, like ourselves, podcasts emerging and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just jumping in, Rob, with your career then. So obviously we listened to the podcast with Steve Ingham. You had a reasonable football playing career, and similar story to myself, but I think you went a little bit further than me a little bit. You was into academy up until Centre of Excellence Academy up until 16. Then you went to A-levels and it didn't work out there, but then joined the YTS system at Doncaster as well, and then played non-league. And you can elaborate a bit more around this and just as you come out post Doncaster. What was it about that experience in your life that helps you later on? Does it really give you some good grounding for your later on in your career?
Yeah, so I went through school and tried to get into the Centre of Excellence or academy system, and wasn't quite. I was on the cusp. The classic answer I always got after trials and things was, "You're not better than what we've got." So it seemed as though at that time, don't know whether that's the same now, but if you got in early doors, if you got in at 9, 10, it'd take quite a lot to actually get binned off and get someone new in. It was always the kind of similar faces. And that's one thing that I struggled with, is just breaking in. And yeah, so at 16, I went to do my A levels and just did 1 year. And thankfully, Doncaster had gone bust, or they'd been relegated anyway to the conference. And the youth team had disbanded, and they'd been on the up. And never really been to Doncaster. I mean, it's only like 25 minutes from where I lived, but didn't know anything about the town, didn't know anything about the club. And then the academy got going again. And I was playing at Wakefield and Emley, which is like a northeast counties, I don't know what tier it was, tier 9, maybe tier 10, not quite sure, in their reserves. And got to know a guy who was doing a bit of scouting for Huddersfield, and he got to know about Doncaster, their academy starting up. And I got a trial there, ended up sticking around. Stayed there for a couple of years, but it was an interesting journey from there back into non-league. And I remember being released from Doncaster at 2021 and saying to my dad, "I'd rather not play. If I can't go full time, I'd rather not bother than get a full-time job and play part-time on a night." And that was probably me in my disillusionment at the time, having been released from pro football. But I suppose that came round again as I got a job and did move into part-time football, and just realised how hard it was. And even now, I've got mates who play part-time and work full-time through the week, and they play Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Hats off to these guys, because they get a lot of them aren't getting that much cash and just love it. And absolutely love it. But yeah, I finished at about 27, 28. That got too much for me. And working, studying, and playing part-time as well. But I think that I always had 3 strands, which was work, which was studying, whether that was doing distance learning MSc, distance learning undergrad, and football. And I think running them streams simultaneously has definitely set me up for what I'm doing now with the multiple streams that I've got going on. And yeah, just having been able to manage that and manage not exactly things that can necessarily cross over. So managing 3 very different streams has probably set me up for what's going on now. And especially the distance learning education that I went through as an undergrad and as an MSc has definitely, hopefully, taught me to manage my time reasonably well, and be very, I suppose, just get on with it and sort yourself out when there's not that lecturer or administrator there to help you out. You just got to go find, you just got to go search for the answers, because you sat in your bedroom or sat in your office going, well, if I don't do it, I've got no help whatsoever. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's set me up for what's coming, really.
But that's really interesting, because one of the things around the distance learning you did through the PFA, right? The Manchester Met, the BSc?
Yeah, I did the PFA at Manchester Met, and then did my MSc or post-grad diploma, whatever the one over the before you do dissertation is, at St Mary's.
St Mary's. And how did you find that? You said obviously you had to go and look and find a lot of answers. Yeah. From a learning perspective, how do you feel that went over those? I mean, 7 years in total for BSc and MSc?
Yeah, it was 5.5 years with the undergrad through the PFA. That was a struggle. That was a real struggle. I think we had about 120, 130 people on the first induction day. And I think maybe 18 graduated, maybe 20 graduated at the end. So there was a massive drop off. And at that time there was, 2011 maybe? We were still getting workbooks sent through the post. We were still getting CDs and DVDs. So hardly anything was online. So just that was a real struggle. And you'd print your assignment off and you'd send it in through the post and all that kind of stuff, which is just feels like 100 years ago when you think of what we're doing now.
Sure.
But yeah, it was a struggle. And again, if you didn't do the work, well, you just fell behind and it got to the exam and you didn't do very well. That was how it went. There was no real
helping hand.
There's no calls with tutors or anything, like zero. And that obviously got better as the MSc at St Mary's, which I really enjoyed. It was hard, but really enjoyed it. And things had moved on since the undergrad in just them 3 or 4 years, and everything was online, and that made things a lot easier. But it's certainly not the ideal way to do it. If from a learning perspective, it's really not, but needs must for a lot of people who want to work and study at the same time. So it was a great option for me.
For sure, it really suited in terms of where you was at that time. Just taking me back a little bit, Rob, to your playing career. So we had Chris Ramsey on here a few weeks ago, who went into a really good detail around the football side of things and the integration between the coaching and the sports science. Do you think your coaching gave you real good grounded knowledge of football, which then helped you early on in your sports science career?
I think...
Or your playing, sorry,
yeah, it was something that I struggled with, if I'm honest with you, that transition between, because it was the same club as well, which probably made it even harder. So I got released in 2007, 2008, went away, did 3 or 4 years in my undergrad, then came back to Doncaster. It was still the same manager, still the same assistant manager. The club had moved on since then, but it was the same captain, majority of the same team was still there, and the same youth team manager. So I was kind of going back as a member of staff, but people still knew me as the player that got released a few years ago. Mm. So that was a really hard transition for me. And I remember two particular scenarios when I was in the gym with the youth team lads, 17, 18-year-old lads, can be a bit bullshit at times. And although they hadn't seen me as the player, they knew that I was and knew that I was young, and probably still saw me as one of them to a certain extent, although I was probably, at the time, 5 or 6 years older than them. And they took a few liberties, and I struggled with that, still wanting to be the player because I was still playing part-time, so I kind of was, but my 9 to 5 was at the club. That was quite tough for me. I remember taking these 2 particular individuals outside to have a word with them. It's been reasonably disruptive. And that was a bit of a turning point for me. I've kind of got to make that switch, and I've got to learn how to turn that side of my brain on when I'm at work, and then switch it again when I'm going to play part-time at night and become the player again. Yeah. But that was quite tough for me. But I think, and even in the couple of discussions that I've had recently around the Henry comments about him not going to the gym and all that kind of thing, I'm not saying this is the reason, but I do still have sympathy for that footballer brain, because I've kind of been there in a situation, and not a fantastic level, like half decent level, of thinking almost them similar things and seeing and growing up with players that had them similar thoughts, but then getting this education that changes them thoughts, but still having sympathy with them kind of guys. And I'm trying to do it for the podcast. I'm trying to pull together a round table of players. And I was speaking to one of the lads who's actually still at Doncaster now, even 13, 14 years on, James Coppinger, last night. And I said, do you want to come on the podcast? He's got some interesting thoughts around sports science. And he said, you won't be very happy with, I'm happy to give him my opinion, but you won't be very happy with them. And I said, well, I think I probably will agree with you on a lot of it, because it's just your perspective and how you've gone about your career. Like if someone's he hasn't been injured very much. He's played 600 odd league games, and he said never been in the gym. And for him as a person, like that's worked. So who's for me to say, Cops, that won't work for you? Because it has. Not to say that'll work for everyone, but in his mind, I've done all right. And I think I'm quite sympathetic with that, and not just going, I'm a sports scientist, I'm an S&C coach, it's my way or nothing else works. So I think that probably that little bit of a playing career, I think maybe has helped that have that sympathy a little bit more with opposing perspectives to what we preach every day.
For sure. No, it's a very good point, Rob. And also, I'm really fascinated around like people not just working in football, but people working in different sports. Like if they've come from that background and maybe they've got coaching or playing careers, do you think they're able to really make the sports science S&C work really specific and understand the sport a little bit more? Or is it something that can really be learned?
I think if you've had, just word this properly, if you've had that playing and coaching, as in technical coaching career, I think it can really help. I'm not saying it's going to work for everyone, I don't know, but I think it can really help just because you've got that understanding of what it feels like. And yeah, I think it can. Just thinking of examples like a Dave Tenney, for example, who's got his UEFA A license and was on the pitch, but was also the sports scientist and had his qualifications in that realm. And there's plenty of people out there. Adam Owen going through the technical side, but also the sports science. Not saying it works in every example, but I think for me, it's just that sympathy. This is what these guys go through, and I understand. I think that's it more than anything.
Yeah.
But I think it does give you a good grounding from like that sympathy.
Obviously, not to say that people can't transfer into sport and do a good job. I think it just gives
100%.
different individuals different strings to the bow, I guess.
Definitely.
Coming back a little bit, Rob, to when you spoke about the relationship now, you found it switching then from player mode, going back to the club that you knew. What advice would you give then to, because obviously people coming out of degree, sports science, S&C, they're going to be fairly similar in age into a lot of the players they're coaching. And I think sometimes that relationship thing is a really key thing to get right. Yeah. What advice could you give to people coming out to make sure that they're not too close to players, but they're obviously close enough to get the best out of them?
Like I said before, I struggled. I did struggle, and it took me a little bit of time. And it took me, I suppose, the bottle to take them two lads outside and give them a bit of a grilling. Yeah. But then, and I suppose one tip, and this is just thinking on the spot here, taking them two lads outside, and they were two big characters in that group of 17, 18-year-olds. One was the captain, one was probably one of the better players. And just hammering them two, just for that 30 seconds, was enough to then pull the rest in line, because they were very much been followed by the rest of the group, hence them being disruptive and having that filter across the group. So just pulling that, and them two could handle it. Them two could probably kick my ass, even at that time. But because I had put myself above them as a member of staff and identified to them that I wasn't the player anymore, I need respect just like any other member of staff, that probably held me in good stead for the rest of my time there, because that message filtered around, Rob's not really going to mess about anymore. And that potentially will affect other areas of their I suppose, time at the club, whether that was the playing time or whatever it may be. But I think just setting standards early doors, and I probably should have done that earlier, and I probably should have the bottles do that earlier. And I suppose it's like with any group of people, setting the standards early doors is the best thing to do. I used to work in schools as well, and there was a common little saying, we don't smile until Christmas with the kids. So you set that precedent early in September, October, November, December, and you kind of molded them how you want, and then we kind of ease off after Christmas. So I thought that was an interesting little saying that I brought across.
That's fantastic. That's a really key thing, though, isn't it? You can always come off a little bit, but it's hard if you spend 2-3 months being the best mate, you can't then turn it on, or it's hard to turn it on.
Yeah, pulling that round's tough, and that was part of my problem, was I didn't go in early enough, but hopefully it worked out all right with them two lads.
I'm sure it did. Great advice. And the fact that you maybe took them outside, well, you didn't scream and shout in front of the whole group, and probably was more powerful that other people didn't directly hear it. You know, they could see you talking to them, but it then got filtered down, like you said, and a strong message across. Rob, just one last one for me, and then I'm going to hand on to Keir, who's going to dive into a little bit more about the business and the podcast side of things. You had some interesting jobs. You said there about working in school, PPA cover, and obviously the business that you derived as well. You worked at Huddersfield Uni, obviously sports scientist at Doncaster, and Catapult as well. So you had a real, amongst other things, a real varied career. Talk to us a little bit about the differences between those and things that maybe you enjoyed, or draw kind of comparisons between them, etc.
Yes, the school one was, so I'd left full-time football, and I was getting paid reasonable cash to play part-time. So I played for a season at Telford, which was a 2.5-hour journey to training on a Tuesday night and a Thursday night and a Saturday. All the rest of the time, I was doing a bit of training on my own, doing a little bit of running. That was my first foray into thinking, how can I best use the time that I've got on my own in my training? That was buying a few nutrition books. That was buying a few coaching books, like just stuff you'd find in W.H. Smith's or whatever at the time.
Yeah.
And the working in schools was just a bit of a way to pass the time, really, and do something reasonably productive and maybe earn a little bit of extra money. So I ended up going back to my primary school and charging kids football lessons, like coaching lessons for the school team. And I think I used to charge like £3 a kid. I thought, well, if I have 10 kids, you know, I'm happy with that. And we had about 35 kids rock up. So I'm thinking, hold on a second, this is all right for an hour's work. But then it was like, well, I'm doing that at my own school where I know my old school where I know the teachers, know a lot of the parents, obviously getting to know a lot of the kids. How can I then, if I could do that 3 or 4 times a week, I'm doing all right. So I ended up getting to know the kind of school system as well. So they had a sports schools coordinator who oversaw 5 or 6 different primary schools, and they were sorting out the after-school care for these kids in terms of what happens in sport. So I got to know the school sports coordinator of my old primary school, who put me on to her other 5 or 6 schools. So I ended up getting 3 or 4 schools, not all of which were getting 35 kids, but we're getting 10. I was getting 10, 15 kids, and I was doing I was doing each night a week, every night of the week, sorry. And got to know the school system, and then ended up doing holiday clubs hosted at high schools where all these kids would congregate in the school holidays, and obviously parents would pay for that. Then ended up selling that. It wasn't really a business. I don't know what. It was just me making a bit of extra cash in hand. I actually sold them schools and them contracts, even though I didn't really have contracts, over to a company that was doing this on a bigger scale. So I ended up selling that to them, then going to work for them on a full-time basis. So that was that long-winded answer. That was kind of working in schools. And then as I was doing my degree, I was then employed by the school for PPA cover. And that was an interesting one. And I always come back to that in chats like this, and even just kind of casual conversation in actually dealing with people. And if you can, I was working at a particular school in a particularly bad area on a state, and I was working with the year 3s, so 7 and 8. So when you say I'm working with 7 and 8-year-olds, easy, piece of cake, deal with 25 7-year-olds. If you can get them kids, them 25 7-year-olds on a rough estate to do what you want to do for an hour, you can do it with anyone. I had kids on the roof. I had kids picking up cones that I'd put down and chucking them around like frisbees. Like, that was the state of the school. So dealing with them kind of characters and trying to get them kids to just do a basic PE lesson really taught me a lot moving forwards. And then when you get to, I don't know, a group of 21-year-olds at a football club, and there's a few characters and things, it's no way as hard as dealing with them 7-year-olds who were launching my cones around or trying to get on the roof, or I don't know, just booting balls everywhere. Like, that's a harsh lesson. And you figure out quickly just to survive and just to get through it and make sure these kids don't hurt themselves or hurt other people. that was definitely a big learning curve for me. But yeah, as I transitioned back into Doncaster and then out of the side with Catapult, the Catapult thing just came about because I just enjoyed the commercial side of it. And this maybe follows on to the next bit with Kieran. Just enjoy the commercial side of the podcast and trying to build that as my own business, really. And thought, how can I combine that interest with my qualifications, occupation, interest also in sports science, and thought they married together reasonably well. So yeah, that was the journey into Catapult, and I think they helped each other, with Catapult helping my own business and the podcast helping Catapult, because the relationships that I was able to kind of pull from one side to the other. So yeah, but then because that had a commercial element in terms of what was expected of me, again, dealing with people, like we were doing a renewal with Preston, and I was in the office with the finance director and Tom Little, and we were talking about the new unit was going to come out and whatnot. And then I'd never been in the room with the finance director before. Like that was a new thing for me. And again, dealing with different people. And all of a sudden, Peter Ridsdale came in, and who was the chairman at the time, I think he still is. And the room just changed. Everyone just sunk a little bit further into the chair. And I knew who he was, but didn't know I'd never met him before. They obviously had. They sunk a little bit. They stopped talking, and all of a sudden it was just me and him talking. And it ended very quickly. And it went from a really positive meeting to a not so positive meeting. And again, that definitely, just thinking back, and this reflecting how I went forward with Catapult in dealing with certain people, it was getting to the person that could make the decision quickest. So I could have spoke to Tom and the finance director, and it probably got done. But if I'd have gone straight to, or got access to the person that was actually saying yes or no, we probably could have got there a month earlier, and everyone could have moved on. So that was a valuable lesson to me within that particular role, and probably wider context as well, was actually speak to the person who makes a decision and get there as quick as possible. You'll get in and out with a positive or a negative quicker than what you would have done, if you hadn't. So
for sure,
a few different lessons, a few random lessons.
Well, all good life lessons, of course, there for everyone. Kiers, do you want to follow on with that in terms of the business?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Rob, what you say about enjoying the commercial side of stuff, because myself and Ross are in a somewhat similar position as yourself, but albeit we're very much at the beginning. We set up this business, dealersportscience.com, a year ago, just over a year ago, and like we're both working in Queen's Park Rangers Academy and stuff like that. And I find this whole subject fascinating. You know, when we were saying that we were going to try and get you on the podcast, we were like, this is brilliant. I think this will be really, really interesting. We're probably all sports people originally, aren't we? But yet, like a lot of what we learn from sport and we can actually apply into the business world. What is it about setting up your business, setting up the podcast that kind of really excited you back then, but also what excites you now?
Yeah, it probably touched on what Ross said about my past jobs and how they've been reasonably diverse. I think that's what really excites me about it. I know there's diversity within particular industries, like 100%, you can go in various different directions. But for instance, audio editing, like 5-10 years ago, would I ever be seeing a laptop editing audio? Like that would just never have ever crossed my mind that that's what I'd be doing. Video editing, audio editing, Photoshop, all these different aspects, accounting. I mean, I've got an accountant, but I've still got to do all the crap that I've got to do before I give it to him.
Yeah.
So it's all them things, just really diverse skills that you've got to not be a master in, but just be aware of. And I suppose I did a podcast with Jason Weber a few months ago, and he was talking about his role as a performance manager. and not have to be an expert in each area, but at least when someone in the department talks to you about X, you can't have a glum look on your face. And I think that's what really excites me, is just that you have to have a handle on a lot of different things. You might have 1% of what, you know, a person working in that industry knows, but yeah, that's what excites me, that diversity.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Well, if you had the chance to work full-time in football, in first team or in academy versus what you do now, which would you choose?
I'd choose what I do now. And that, I think it's the decision to make the transition. It all makes sense when you look in reverse. Of course it does. But I think even at the time, I was very conscious of what I wanted from my lifestyle. I wanted my lifestyle to be. And again, going back to Ross's comment about the job situation and the quite diverse things that I've done, I suppose, in the past, was what do I actually want? What do I want my life to be like on a day-to-day basis? And how can I manufacture, and I don't like the word manipulate because it makes it sound as if this is negative, but manipulating things so I can actually get that as best I can. And one thing that I actually wanted was freedom. And it's a word that crossed my mind and went through my mind a lot, probably 4 or 5 years ago. How can I maximize the freedom that I have, but also do what I want to do, as in the role that I want to do, or the job, the industry that I want to work in? And that, moving back again, comes back from my dad working as a self-employed architect for the majority of my childhood, and the benefits that brought me as a son. And again, linking into the football with, he was the only parent when we used to play behind closed doors game at Doncaster on a Wednesday at 2:00. He was the only parent there because no one else could make it. And I remember even at that time going, I want that. Like, even I don't have any kids now, but if we do, that's what I want. And he could work at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night to make up for that time. And even if he wasn't going to watch me play football, he'd have been out on his bike at 2:00 when it's a nice day, because he knew that at 10 o'clock he could just work. And I think that, yeah, in a long-winded answer, it was the freedom that I wanted to create. And I, working in a full-time capacity at a football club, just doesn't, in my opinion, from my experience, just wouldn't have given me that. And I've been lucky enough to kind of manipulate, again, sounds negative, but manipulate things to try and fit that as best I possibly can.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And we'll probably touch on a lot of that stuff towards the end, just about where the industry is at. But we had Rich Clark last week, and we had a good chat about that type of thing, where the market has become saturated with S&C coaches and sports scientists. And are we entering into a slightly different phase now, where people need to start thinking, well, we can't all work in professional football or professional rugby, and we need to start being a bit more creative and work in schools and setting up our own business and everything. And like, the beauty of that, like you say, is that just that additional kind of freedom that you can get from that lifestyle. Yeah,
I'm really conscious now. I'm glad you brought it up, because it's been a theme of mine since we said that we were going to do this, and a few conversations that have happened since. And I spoke to Des Ryan 2 nights ago, just a little thread on Twitter, because I'd put out a video that I did with Lachlan Wilmot, who was at GWS Giants, then Parramatta Eels, and had made a transition out of pro sport into the private sector with his own gym. Yeah. And I'd put something about Lachlan's exit strategy, and Des had replied to that saying there is really a lot of positives working in pro sport. And that was his first line, and I thought, that makes me now know that I'm coming across like working in pro sport is potentially negative, and that's absolutely not what I'm saying. Like, I had a great time in all different areas in that. Yeah. But I think what is a bit of a mission for me is just to open people's eyes. That makes me sound as if I'm trying to be above people. That's not the case, but just trying to open people's eyes in the fact that there is other opportunities out there over and above pro sport that can offer so much. I think the difficulty with getting that across is the fact that you go on UK Sport website, you go on UKSC website, all these mysterious opportunities that we all talk about in schools, in communities, etc., they're not there. And you go, well, where are they? Because you've got to create them for them to exist.
Yeah.
I think that's quite hard for people to maybe grasp, because the traditional way of thinking is school, college, uni, job. And if you go that route, you are looking on UK Sport for a job. But if you've got that maybe a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit, or you've had an influence from a self-employed dad, or I don't know, a business owning auntie, or whatever it may be, start to think, hold on a minute, I can potentially create these things on my own and have all the benefits that I've mentioned before around the freedom and stuff. Not to say there's not negatives, because there are. But yeah, them kind of opportunities have to be created. And I think what Des said on the thread, there's potential there. There's huge potential there. And I do think that, and I was guilty of this as anyone, was being sucked in by the bright lights. And I think that's an easy thing to do, and not to say that there is the bright lights there, and that can be fantastic.
Yeah.
But I just think there's so many other things that maybe don't get the recognition, but for you personally, that can be so rewarding and enriching for your life to work in communities, in schools. And I've always thought, and I've said to my wife, and she doesn't believe me, but later in life, I'd like to be a teacher. I just think that's where I will end up going, whether that be a primary school teacher, probably a primary school rather than secondary school, but yeah, go back to kind of where it all started, really, just for that enrichment in what you're dealing with and what you're actually molding, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, long-winded question. There's lots of opportunities, but I think they've got to be created rather than handed on a plate.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think with Des, I mean, I know Des well, obviously, like Des is in a fantastic position there where he can develop strategy and design structures and build stuff over time in a really, really big Category 1 academy club that are in the Premier League with loads of resources and loads of brilliant facilities. There's a lot of people, and he knows this, there's a lot of people who are down in the dirt, scrambling around.
That was me.
That was all of us. Like the only difference with Ross was he was scrambling around in the sand in Qatar, so it was a little bit different.
looking for gold.
Yeah. You and Martin Boucher, Ross. Jeez, not a bad place to be scrambling around. But like people they're interning and they're doing the urine sampling and the RPEs and the GPS. And obviously it's a tough gig, and the bright lights of the Premier League are a long, long way from that, so I think it's good to be aware of the pros and cons of both, and I think it'd be naive not to be,
Of course.
Yeah. Just to bring it on slightly different angle then, I'm interested, when did you and how did you turn the, I suppose, pastime of running a podcast into then a viable business?
I think I'm still working on it. It's honestly, I'm absolutely winging it. So the podcast, 6 years old, just over 6 years old, and I think I got some support in terms of sponsorship after about episode 100. So I'd been doing it for 2.5 years by the time I got to that point. And I never thought that was never the aim. Yeah. Like far from it. And I suppose it was when I started getting into the commercial side with Catapult, just because it was an interest for me. that probably changed my way of thinking of what can I do to generate income rather than, I suppose, the philanthropic, I don't know if that's the right word, but thinking of that, what's the best thing I can do for everyone else?
Yeah.
Actually going, that's great, and I'll keep doing that. But if I'm gonna continue with this, how can things work for me to make this sustainable?
Yeah.
And that's where the kind of cogs started turning. Okay, maybe there's something here. How can I then monetize it, and how can I grow it? So when I was working for Catapult, there was a little bit of chat around who I was having sponsoring the podcast. At the time, Catapult had bought the AMS. What's it called? Can't remember. They renamed AMS by Catapult anyway. And I had a sponsor who was a competitor to that product.
Okay.
So there was a conversation of, we can't really have you doing that.
Mm.
So I understood that, but thought that's a big red flag for me. There's only one way this is going to go. So this was just a bit of a scramble to then think, okay, there's got to be an out here, because I can't let what I've built be moved over and become orange, white, and black with a Catapult logo on it, because that's just not what it's going to be. Yeah. So then there was a bit of a realization that was going to potentially happen. And how could I mitigate that by basically leaving and doing something else? So it was then understanding the value of the podcast and potentially what I'd created and what the potential, the creation was, and approached a couple of people about doing some contract work and whatnot, and ended up jumping with the main aim of paying the bills with the contract work, also having the time and the resource to build the podcast. And I suppose, like I said at the start, I'm still winging it as I go. But that's the beauty of it, is understanding all these different areas. Like at the minute, I'm transcribing some of the podcasts, and how do I go about doing that? Okay, so there's automatic software out there that you get it back after spending 40 quid, and it just means nothing, because the automatic software just doesn't pick up any scientific language, which means that I have to go back through it. I don't have time to go back through it, so I've ended up paying for someone else to go back through it, and it's all these kind of things. Or do you figure things out like going to Upwork and you're paying someone for their time to do it and transcribe it for you? That's normally someone from maybe like a country like Nigeria or Philippines, who English isn't the first language. Then you're dealing with that up. So it's all these things you kind of starting to work out, but that's the beauty of it. And I suppose now I'm going, so up until probably the new year, it was a matter of building up a little bit of capital within the business to then go, okay, now I've got a little bit to work with. Where am I going to spend it? And just like any business would, you go, right, okay, what's a marketing budget? Like, how much of this cash can go towards marketing? How much cash can go towards equipment? And all just this divvying up of the little bit of capital that's been built in the business to figure out how it can grow. And coming back to again, what I said at the start was, how can this be profitable, and how can this actually benefit me and the business to be able to make it sustainable? It's all these kind of things that I'm figuring out as I go, and literally like on a daily basis, making balls ups and then try to figure it out, and just them kind of things, which I think is really interesting. So I don't think I have figured out that there is a business there. I'm just rolling with it and hope it continues. That's where I'm at the minute.
Yeah. It's really interesting, because like we're in somewhat the same situation where you have no clue about setting up a website, as you say, a marketing campaign, and putting your stuff out there, and the video, audio editing. But it can be really enjoyable, and
I love it.
Yeah, it's like learning new skills on probably like a daily basis, picking up new things. For anyone that's because I know there are lots of people actually interested in podcasts and setting up podcasts and stuff like that. Can you briefly give a little bit of information just about the technical stuff? Like, did you, or for instance, at the moment, did you start out, or is it different now? A camera, a little mic, you know, what like Podbean, I think you use, and a few little bit of information like that, because I have a friend who does a podcast review show of other podcasts. So as you can imagine, there are some people who are really into it.
Yes, no, absolutely. And it's funny because I had a call last night with a provider for an hour and a half. Didn't think it'd be that long, but going through the technical ins and outs of this new software. But yeah, it's literally a daily thing of how can I make it better? How can I produce it better, make it sound better, make it look better? So at the start, I think the first 10 or so episodes, and it almost kills me to say this, but was me on my desk in the bedroom of the one-bed apartment that we had at the time, with Skype coming out of the speakers. So we had separate speakers coming out of a desktop computer, my phone next to the speaker, and I was speaking into the phone, and the audio was coming out of the speaker into the phone to record it on voice memo. I just didn't know any other way to do it. I was just ignorant to the fact that there was actually people getting paid a lot of money to do this and make it sound good. But I was in the situation where I just thought, I want to do it, don't know anything about it, I'm just going to do it and wing it and see what happens, which is kind of the story of my life, really. But then you figure out there's actually a lot of YouTube videos out there, to tutorials and information, and people selling all these packages to make podcasts and things. And ended up getting a microphone for Christmas 1 year, I think, off my wife after a year or two. And then moved on to a little bit of better microphone that's actually upstairs, because I've been booted out of the office today to come down here.
The wife comes first.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I've kind of built the hardware over time, but I think that, and I suppose the longer I've gone on, the more important I've seen that audio quality has been integral, especially as podcasts have become better produced and there's more out there. There's people spending fortunes on how things sound, and if it sounds horrendous, me being been quite anal on that kind of thing, it kills it, like straight away it kills it. And I know how I feel about it, so I'm conscious of making it as good as I can make it. But you can spend as much as you want on a microphone. I've spoken to a few people recently who want to set up podcasts, and you can spend 50 quid or you can spend 500 quid and the rest to get you set up right. But I think mine was about 100 quid, so nothing too much for the amount I use it. But in terms of the technical aspects, I've always been on Podbean. That's just the provider that I use. So if anyone that doesn't know, I'm speaking to you two who obviously clearly do. But it goes on iTunes, but iTunes have zero to do with it, as do all Apple products, and just rob from everyone else and do the easy bit. So all the audio gets uploaded to Podbean, in my case, and then that shoots out automatically to Spotify, iTunes, and whatnot. I've had a little foray recently into YouTube. So at the minute I am, and this is brutal, it's screen recording, the audio capture through their software. So I use Squadcast. So through that, I get the audio. On the screen, I'm actually seeing the visual of the person in front of me like we are now. And because they don't offer that as a service, the actual video, I'm screencasting that and then chopping it up, putting it within a template in a video recorder, and then putting it out on YouTube. So the workflow is horrific. But to get what I want out of everything, I'm having to make this contrived way of getting what I want. Yeah. Hence the chat last night with a company called Blinder, blinder.tv, I think. And they do, what do? They work with the FA, loads of different big organizations, and they offer kind of a consumer product. And they basically offer high quality MP4s and high quality MP3s within the call itself, which is kind of exactly what I want. So again, the third time in a roundabout way, I'm kind of getting quite anal on this kind of stuff. And I'm really enjoying it because you can go you can get into it as much as you want. It's a minefield, but there's lots on YouTube to help, whether it's editing, like Audacity is where I do all the audio editing. That's free, open source. There's loads of YouTube clips. Adobe Audition, I do all the templates and stuff in. So we can go as deep as you want. I fear I'm boring people already. I'm excited to get about this.
Listen, I'm the same. I use Final Cut Pro and Podbean, and it's really interesting. And we kind of tend to think of it. Myself, Ross, and Joe, we worked with the London GA team, the London Gaelic football team, and then obviously myself and Ross work with Queen's Park Rangers Academy, and the three of us started off only a short time ago just chatting, and started recording and speak about a topic. But obviously now we're bringing in guests, and we find that really, really worthwhile. I'll shift from the technical stuff over to Ross. Ross, you're going to just have a quick chat about some of the guests and what makes a good podcast and everything.
Yeah, just a few about the podcast and your years doing it, Rob. But before I do that, just a reminder to all listeners, head over to dealeysportscience.com. There's a good promotion up there at the minute for any sports scientist, S&C coach working in any sport, but use the code FOOTBALLSS, all capital letters, and you'll get a discount on all the services we go over there. So head over to the website and check out what we've got. Rob, so I think it's 293 at that time of recording episodes that are out, I think.
It is, you're absolutely spot on. Yeah.
I had to double look and make sure that it updated on the phone, but that's amazing. That's really amazing. I want to put you on the spot a little bit with a few questions, but you feel free to. Who would you say out of all those episodes, and in inverted commas, I'm going to call this, is your most or your highest profile guest that you've had on?
I had Nick Gill at the time, who was with the S&C coach for the All Blacks, which may not, again, he hasn't got 150,000 followers on Twitter and 5 million on Instagram, but at the time I viewed him as probably the highest profile I had at the time. I think he was in the hundreds somewhere, I can't remember. But yeah, he was, I definitely put him on a pedestal because of what he'd done and how long he'd been at the All Black, and he definitely did not disappoint in that. There's been quite a few. Who else has there been? And then the people who've kind of built an audience since I've had them on, like a Brett Bartholomew, for example, who's obviously got an incredible name out there. I suppose it's different to how you define it, really. But I think as soon as you said it, instantly I thought Nick Gill, and I think I was maybe reading the what's the All Blacks book?
Legacy.
Yes. Yeah. Which was like, oh my God, this guy's in this book. Like, he's doing all these good things. He's got the academic background, but he's also got the practical. And not only has he got the practical, but he's working with, one of the best sports teams in the world. So that was huge for me. So I'm gonna put my
on Nick Gill.
Yeah, put it to that and say Nick Gill.
Thank you very much. I mean, you've had so many high profile into how you want to define it in different ways. Has there been any clear, and you can say a few examples of when you've been speaking to the guests and maybe sharing different information, that your philosophy or your thoughts around certain topics has completely shifted within sports science?
Give me a second. I'm going to think about that.
That's a tough one to reflect on.
Yeah. Has it? I'm sure there has. I can't think of any specific. I'll tell you what. One was James Wild. I've done two with him, but specifically the first one, and how much detail he went into with regards to his sprint profiling.
Yeah.
Ironic at the time, I was working for the Welsh lacrosse team, Welsh female lacrosse, sorry, and he was working with the English female lacrosse. So we played each other a couple of times, and they'd beaten us. But I'd met him at Surrey Sports Park, I think it was Surrey Sports, where we had the home internationals. And I'd spoken to him just after then. So we were kind of, I was only voluntary doing it there, but we were kind of competitors at the time. And then I spoke to him, and he was talking about how much this profiling he was doing with his girls. And I thought, oh my life, they're doing all this stuff, and I'm just an absolute fraud. I'm doing like the Billy basics with the girls when I saw them. And he's doing all this stuff, and I'm like, no wonder they're battering us. No wonder they're quicker than us and all this kind of stuff. But I suppose that highlighted someone like James, who, yeah, needless to say, he's done some great work in the area and was doing a PhD at the time. This was all filtering towards this bigger piece of work, because it wasn't necessarily all part of the service that he was offering to lacrosse. It just happened that they were part of the process for him. I suppose it just highlighted the amount of detail these guys who are working in that area of sprinting, of speed, were going into. And I think that probably, made me feel a complete fraud and thinking, okay, these guys, they're going into the minutiae here, and that's something I need to upskill on. Absolutely. Yeah, it's maybe not necessarily a change of philosophy, definitely a change of perspective and where I need to spend my time to be able to spend better time when I'm with the girls.
Thanks for the good answer. There's a couple of tough questions there. We'll get a little bit easier.
That's fine, mate.
We have been called the Andrew Marr of the sports podcast. But
I'm happy
anyway,
that I like the questions.
You spoke on Steve Ingham's podcast around the most impressive practitioners being those that can really turn it up in terms of scientific language and talk good lingo, but then also those that can sit in a pub and style it down as well. And I think you mentioned JB Morin, which we're a massive fan of JB Morin and the French practitioners. What would you say that would define the most successful, Rob, in terms of that ability to for them? We spoke about relationships, but to be able to talk up and then to really kind of put it into layman's terms as well.
Yeah, and another one that comes to mind is Darren Burgess. And it's interesting when people say, oh, who's the best practitioner that you've had on? I've not seen any of these guys work. Like, who knows? But I just go on what other people have said who work with them and what I know them as a person. And I would suggest, not that I've seen Darren hands-on with a player or whatever it may be, but I would suggest that he definitely fits into that category. And given his role at Arsenal and what I've known him speaking to in the podcast and a few other times personally, is that he can definitely do that. He can definitely dial that up to speak with a chief exec, to speak with an owner, but also come back down and have a drink at a pub and talk nonsense for an hour. So yeah, I think he definitely fits in with that JB example that I think I gave previously. I think that is really, really important. And I don't see how you can be successful in how I term, or we all may term successful in getting a high profile job if you struggle with that. If you struggle with that, I suppose managing up and down and communicating up and down and being able to convey your message, whatever that message may be, however simple. If you can't do that up and down the chain, I can't see how you would progress into that kind of successful bracket of a Darren, of a JB.
Yeah,
that's just my perspective.
No, I totally agree. Is that something you think that can be learned, or is that something that's kind of in certain individuals?
Interesting. I've been listening to an audiobook recently, Principles by Ray Dalio. So he's an investment guy, invests in the markets and put together processes as he did with his work, but in terms of his leadership and his management of people. And what I've actually got the quote here because I thought I was hoping it'd come up because it really made a big impact. So I hope this kind of ties in with it. He was talking about his recruitment. I know we're talking about the recruitment. I'm talking about the recruitment when actually the question was about the established practitioner. But he was talking about character, creativity, and common sense over experience. Not all the time. Obviously, we do go experience when needed, but character, creativity, and common sense were the three things that he really looked for when hiring. And I think that comes back into the question with the practitioners. They're three essential things to be able to for me to become a Darren Burgess, to become a JB Marin, and even to become a Joe Bloggs, wherever. To me, them three things are really, really important. And there's additional things, of course, but I think a lot of it, from what I've seen, a lot of it is within the character of the person to be able to do the things I've mentioned Darren or JB can do going up and down the chain. I think it 100% can be learnt and developed, but I think there's a lot in the person's character that gives them that massive grounding to be able to do that. And I think if it's not there, maybe there is a ceiling. I don't know. I'm just talking nonsense now, but yeah.
No, it's a tough one. It's the nature and nurture stuff as well. It's a very tough one, but it's an interesting one when you're looking at hiring characters and working in the thing. Last one from me on the podcast, Rob, and then Kieran will close off with a few things about the industry. When you've obviously had some of the most highest profile guests over the 290 episodes. In some ways, you've peaked in terms of what you can get out of the industry and who you can interview. Where next for you? Where would you like to go on your podcast, and what would you like to achieve in years to come?
Yeah, so I think the next stage for me is the production value of what I'm doing. I think there's always, people say it reasonably regularly, is surely you're going to run out at some point. And that, I don't think that's ever going to be the case, because people move around, people have different experiences, people are coming up through the system. Like I spoke to Lachlan Wilmot in early days, maybe 40 or 50. And he'd just gone to GWS. No one really knew who he was. And then has gone on to the high performance manager at Parramatta, owning the facility. So 3 very distinct stages of his career that I did tap into at the time and would have given completely different perspectives from the one before. So even if you are getting to people 2, 3, 4 years after you'd previously spoken to them, so much can change in there. So I don't think there's going to be any worry of things running out. But I think for me, like I said, with regards to the podcast and them becoming so popular, I think it is trying to open up to new audiences with the production value, moving into YouTube, moving into the video side of things, but also not forgetting that there's, 230 hours of audio that's just sat on my Dropbox that I can repurpose and make more digestible and pick out critical information, key quotes, key learnings, and repurpose that into other areas. For example, ebooks. Can all the speed episodes be summarized into a 3-page document that is for the people that maybe don't have enough time or don't enjoy listening to podcasts? Can they get the summary? You can go on Amazon, I think, or different websites and get the little books that are like a 50-page condensed version of the bigger book. Things like that is, I think, is the next stage for me to actually make the most of what I've got and try to tap into new audiences that maybe haven't got to podcasts yet, or don't like podcasts, or haven't heard of the podcast that I'm doing, or, you know what I mean? So I think it's just making the most of what I've got, because I'm very guilty, as very many other people who do podcasts are, is you do it, you get it out, and you go, right, next one. When's the next one coming? When can I get it in the diary? And you just leave that there. You kind of push it, but you just leave it and let it do its thing, and it's on to the next. So it's just reflecting and trying to make the most of all that other good stuff.
Perfect. Thanks,
That's the
Rob.
next for me.
Brilliant. No, that's cool. That's cool. Rob, you're relatively active on Twitter and on social media. Relatively. Well, we're quite active, and we like people who put their head up above the parapet, and we like people who challenge the status quo and stuff like that, and not afraid to say out their thoughts about stuff. And that's just I suppose type of people we are, and we appreciate people who are like that. I'm interested over the last few months, or in the last year at least, you ran a couple of polls and put out a few questions about second streams of income for S&C coaches and sports scientists, and just about setting up people setting up their own business and stuff like that. And we not to go over some of the ground that we already did, but what do you think about the topic then of your S&C coach who works either full-time or part-time with a team and is paid employment, and then having a little second earner on the side? Is that a phase that we're going into in the industry in general?
I think I'll preface the answer by saying that I think there's a lot of people who, maybe especially overseas, I don't know if it's the same here, but aren't allowed to do anything on the side if they're in a full-time position. I think especially in America, that's maybe a bigger thing than it is here. So although I'm talking a lot about it, there is people maybe who go, yeah, I'm a contractor, I can't do anything anyway.
Yeah.
However, I think if you can, to me, this situation has highlighted it that we're in currently, that for me, it's a necessity. And that was one of the reasons why I left Catapult, and I've gone into a little bit of detail of why. But another reason was I didn't want to have my mortgage. I didn't want to have the ability to pay my mortgage on the head of the person that I was working for. The one guy who could go, Rob, we don't need you anymore. See you later.
Yeah.
I wanted that to be spread out. I wanted the risk to be spread out, basically. And for me, that was the basic premise of the side hustle, or however you want to call it, is just spreading risk.
Yeah.
If you're reliant on one income and that goes, well, you're done. Like, you've got to think quick. But so what I'm talking about is not having an office and a secretary and all that kind of thing on the side as this kind of growing business, like personal business or personal brand, or wherever it may be. And just saying, in my opinion, there should be something, ideally something that can be scaled up and down. I know that's harder. Easier said than done.
Yeah.
But also something that potentially complements what you're doing day to day anyway. And I think that's always been a criticism that people have said, but it takes the emphasis away from your 9 to 5. It takes your heart out of what you're doing. I don't think it has to. I think it potentially could, but I think something that can enhance what you're doing. For example, an S&C coach who's, I don't know, doing some data analysis for a club that, I don't know, semi-professional club. Actually, scrap that idea. A S&C coach, a professional football club who's doing some pre-season testing with a semi-professional club. Something like that, and setting that up as a service for a Conference North or a Conference South club who don't have a full-time member of staff, but want someone every month to do some intermittent testing with the lads.
Yep.
Something like that can be scaled up. You can take on a few more clients, or scaled down. You can only take one client on because you've taken on more hours of work, or you've got a new manager in and he expects more, etc., etc. Just something that is there just in case. And I think we're in a situation now where everyone's taking things online, and having things online that are scalable without your involvement, whether that be, like I said before, creating ebooks or online programming or just things like that. I know that area has boomed over the last 2 months, and I think it's difficult to get into, and it's difficult to become I suppose well known in that area and generate income in that area. But I think that is the way to go, because although the testing of Conference North clubs may be good in the short term, to actually scale that is difficult. So the online offering could be the way to go. But I definitely think people are getting to the scenario now where they're thinking, maybe I probably should do that. And this situation has just highlighted it for me.
Yeah, it hit me when I listened to a podcast and read an article about Shea Murphy with Man City under 23s, and he left, and he set up his own business, and I suppose he was still under the umbrella of City Group, so he was doing a bit of work for Melbourne City. He went and visited New York, was it New York City, I think, FC.
Yeah.
But then he was like rocking up with the All Indian Cricket Association and hopping all over the world and stuff like that. So, you know, it's really interesting where your career might take you. Are there any learnings that you got from that, like the time that when you asked a few questions, you ran a few polls? Is this something that people are interested in? Is it something they're doing? Are many people out there doing this type of thing, or how have things changed?
Yeah, I think the way people think about it has changed. And I think, again, not to say it again, but I suppose I don't apologise because it is the situation we're in. This situation has highlighted it for people. And I don't think we're maybe as exposed to it. I mean, you guys know far better than me what the climate's like in academy and men's football at the minute in the pro game, but especially like in Australia where a lot of guys got stood down with, I don't know what their furlough scheme was like. I don't think it was quite as good as ours. But I've heard a couple of stories of people like on the Thursday, okay, lockdown, Friday, don't need you anymore, we'll give you a shout when we do. So in that situation, you've got people going, well, what do I do? And I think it's probably potentially burnt a lot of people in how clubs have treated them, especially over that side of the world. Maybe we're a little bit protected from it. But I think there is a bit of a change in the perception of the side hustle as what I didn't come up with the term, but as I've always described it, it's doing things that are sustainable, it's doing things that are scalable, in areas that aren't going to affect your 9 to 5. And I think it's again the kind of social and the social aspect and how it's perceived with fellow employees. I know that's potentially a struggle for people of, if you're an S&C coach and the head of sports science isn't doing it, but you're doing it, is it, well, who do you think you are type of situation? I know it's quite a difficult thing to navigate, but I think it is something that, people are changing the perception on. I think it'll only get more prevalent of people having little things on the side.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose, especially with the current crisis that we're in. In ways, we spoke to Rich Clark about it last week, about we're kind of suffering from a bit of a popularity problem in that the market is saturated with so many S&C coaches, so many sports scientists. And I know that something that you're quite hot on is practitioners having other skills rather than just the normal X's and O's and can you this and can you do that. Can you speak a little bit about that and what you think, I suppose, some of them skills are?
Yeah, this first story comes to mind. I was speaking to Tom Batchelor, who's at Harlequins. I had him on the podcast, I don't know, a year ago maybe, and I was speaking to him straight after we went into lockdown. And I think I don't know if he'd been put on furlough or whatever the situation was. He wasn't working anyway. And he loves Harlequins, absolutely loves the place where he works. But his background was in banking. He'd been working in the city, I think investment banking, essentially. And he'd actually rung I don't know if it was the managing director or CEO of Harlequins and said, I've actually got a reasonably unique set of skills in terms of how I deal with numbers and what I do on a day-to-day basis. Yes, with the sports science stuff. Also my background. Is there anything I can do to help the organization? I'm more than happy to offer my assistance. So I thought that was really interesting with his background in banking to be able to offer that assistance to the club. But I think there's loads of examples, maybe not as generous as that, but skills that can be transferable into other areas. And the way I think about it is, if you're an S&C coach, you're one of, I don't know, 50,000. I don't know, whatever. Just put a number on it. 25,000. But if you're an S&C coach and you're just in the mix, you could be first. You could be 25,000 on the list of good. But if you can add these little extra things to your armory, so then if you can learn to code, okay, how many S&C coaches are decent coaches but can learn to code? Okay, maybe you're down to 2,000. So you're in that 2,000 bracket. If you can code, you do decent coach, and I don't know, you're good with Power BI and you can visualize the data. Okay, how many people can do that? Now you're down to like 50. Okay, I'm in the top 50 of guys that can have these specific set of skills. I think that's the way I see it. The more you can add little tools to your toolbox, to me, you become more valuable. Especially, again, this situation, are we going to become an industry that looks at, is 2 roles going to be 1? Is 2 roles going to be 1.5 because clubs are in financial difficulties?
Yeah.
If you've got one very defined, specific, narrow role, whereas someone may be able to like have a half an idea of doing that, is that specific guy going to get moved aside for that more general guy who could potentially tap into? So for me, them other little strings to your bow, and just makes you more valuable, especially in a time now where, people may be asked to do things that aren't necessarily number on our list.
Yeah, I think the industry will, without a doubt, will probably shrink and tighten a little bit, because there just won't be as much money going around, and whether football can get back in front of fans and stuff like that. And I really like that concept of just the additional skills. And like something I had said at the very beginning when COVID emergency started is like, the people who are creative, adaptable, and probably can do stuff online will probably do well. And Ross, I'll pass over to you. It's interesting, Rob, actually, the Mark Warburton, the gaffer with QPR first team, was a banker. He started off, had a banking career, and so very, very, very interesting. You can bring lots of different skills into your current role in sport.
Of course.
Well, Rob, I know we've taken up loads of your time. A massive thank you from me and Kieran. It excited us hugely, not just in our journey of the podcast and the business, but also your knowledge in sports science and the plethora of guests that you've had on. So we really appreciate your time coming in. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. It really has. My pleasure. I hope I've lived up to that. Definitely. We'll let you know what the numbers say, Rob. That's the numbers don't lie. The numbers do not lie. I'm very, very certain it will. But thank you very much, and we really appreciate it. And just again for the listeners, thank you very much. Please share the podcast. It's on all the platforms. The Locker Room Podcast. Some great episodes coming up in the next few weeks, including this one and ones to follow. And again, head over to dailysportscience.com. Football SS is the code for any sports scientist and S&C coach, where you'll get a good discount for the services there. Thank you very much, Kieran. Thank you for today. I took the reins to being a host. I hope I lived up to expectation. Well, I'm just wondering, are we changing from Daily Sports Science to Bennett to Sports Science now? Is that it? It does sound good. It does sound good. Yeah, no, Rob, thanks very much. It was great. Really, really good having you on. Thank you. Pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks, guys. Cheers, mate. Thank you.